There are people who are not killed because they commit crimes. They are killed because they are too pure. There are societies that do not fear darkness because they have lived in it long enough to consider it normal. But in those very societies, a single person who dares to live truthfully, who refuses to compromise with falsehood, can become a greater threat than any enemy. Human history is filled with bloody wars, but there is a tragedy even more terrifying than war itself: when a society decides to eliminate those who force it to feel ashamed before its own conscience. The prophet Yahya entered history in exactly that way. He did not arrive with armies. He did not lead a revolutionary movement. He did not call for rebellion or uprising. He did not shout slogans, compete for power, or write new laws. He simply lived a life so pure that those who survived on lies could not endure it. And that purity signed his death sentence long before anyone dared to read it aloud. There is a painful truth history often tries to conceal. When a society becomes accustomed to compromise, truth is no longer seen as light, but as danger. When wrongdoing is legalized, morality becomes a silent accusation. And in such moments, the righteous do not need to speak loudly. Their very presence is enough to make an entire system of power feel threatened. Yahya lived in such an age when religion had been distorted to serve power, an age when desire was protected by law and conscience was pushed into the shadows, an age when the silence of the majority became complicity in evil. In that environment, Yahya did not bring a new or shocking message. He simply repeated what had always been true. And that was precisely what society most refused to hear. People often assume prophets are killed because they oppose political authority. But Yahya did not do that. He did not challenge the throne with force. He did not threaten social order with violence. He merely stated that there are limits power is not allowed to cross. And in a society where power had grown accustomed to being limitless, such words were unforgivable. Yahya's presence was like a mirror placed in the middle of a public square. No one was forced to look into it. But those who did could no longer pretend they did not know what they saw. And when people refuse to face the truth about themselves, they will try to shatter the mirror rather than change their reflection. And that is why the story of Yahya is not simply the story of a prophet who was murdered. It is the story of how a society reacts when it is forced to confront truth. It is the story of humanity's deepest fear, not the fear of punishment, but the fear of exposure. What makes this story even more unsettling is that it does not belong only to the past. Every era has its own Yahyas. People who refuse to compromise. People who refuse to blur the line between right and wrong. People whose lives force society to ask questions it would rather forget. And in every era, the fate of such people is rarely peaceful. Welcome to Prophetic History Explained. This is not merely a place to retell ancient stories. It is a place to confront truths that still carry weight today. The story of Yahya is not told to lull the conscience to sleep, but to awaken it, and not to soothe fear, but to pose the hardest questions of all. What happens when truth becomes society's enemy, and what is the real cost of living rightly? If you feel heaviness, unease, or even a quiet fear from the very first moments of this story, that is not by chance. The story of Yahya is not for those seeking comfort. It is for those brave enough to listen until the end. Subscribe to Prophetic History Explained to support us in continuing to bring stories that are deep, honest, and uncompromising with truth. Because there are stories that, if left untold, history will repeat in far more brutal ways. Some miracles are not meant to astonish, but to force humanity to rethink how it sees the world. The birth of Yahya belongs to that kind of miracle. It was not only a defiance of biological limits, but a quiet yet piercing message about how Allah assigns responsibility, chooses individuals, and dismantles assumptions society clings to as absolute truths. Zachariah spent nearly his entire life in patience. He was not bitter over childlessness, nor did he resent destiny or doubt Allah's justice. But a silent concern grew in his heart as he watched the society of Bani Israel. Morality was being twisted, religion was becoming a tool of power, and those entrusted with guiding the community were increasingly compromising with wrongdoing. Zachariah understood that the problem was not whether he had a child, but who would protect truth after he was gone. His prayer, therefore, carried a very different depth. It was not born from loneliness in old age, but from responsibility toward a faith standing at the edge of collapse. He did not ask for a child to preserve lineage, but for a successor to safeguard truth. That purity of intention gave his prayer a special weight before Allah. Allah's response shattered not only natural law, but human logic itself. Yahya was born under circumstances everyone deemed impossible, yet the miracle did not stop at his birth. What made the story even more profound was that Allah granted Yahya wisdom and clarity while he was still a child. While society assumes children are incomplete beings unfit for heavy responsibility, Allah entrusted Yahya with a grave mission from an early age. This confronts every era with an uncomfortable question. Do we underestimate the potential of youth? While society delays responsibility, insisting young people should simply enjoy life and wait for maturity, and the story of Yahya reveals another truth. Maturity does not come from time, but from awareness. Allah does not wait for a certain age to assign purpose. He assigns it when the heart is pure enough not to distort truth. Yahya did not grow up indulged or sheltered. From a young age, he carried a clear sense of purpose. When invited to play like other children, he said he was not created for meaningless pursuits. This was not coldness or rejection of childhood, but early awareness of responsibility. He was not robbed of childhood. He was gifted a clarity many people only reach near the end of their lives. Allah granting Yahya early wisdom also challenges modern assumptions. Today, youth are often dismissed as shallow or unfit to lead. Yet Yahya proves that purity of heart can produce a form of wisdom beyond age. Not knowledge accumulated from books, but the ability to distinguish right from wrong without being clouded by desire or social pressure. The birth and childhood of Yahya carry a clear message. Allah does not choose people by society's standards. He is not bound by age, status, or material capacity. He looks at hearts and intentions. And when he entrusts responsibility to a child, it is not a burden, but an honor. This story forces us to ask how much potential has been wasted because society did not trust the young. How much responsibility was delayed out of fear they were not ready. Yahya is not merely a miracle of the past, but a reminder for today. The future of faith, morality, and society does not rest on age, but on hearts courageous enough to carry truth early. Some people are misunderstood their entire lives simply because they choose to live differently. Yahya was one of them. Many looked at his ascetic life and assumed he fled the world, that he abandoned society because he could not bear its weight. This is a shallow view. Yahya did not turn away from the world. He simply refused to let it take control of his heart. He had no home, no wealth, no family, no social status. He lived among mountains and rivers, ate what nature provided, wore rough garments. This poverty was not weakness or escape. It was a deliberate choice. He understood that in a society ruled by power and desire, inner independence is the most dangerous thing of all. When people possess too much, they fear losing it. Fear makes them easy to control. Yahya severed that chain from the start, not because he despised material life, but because he understood its hidden power. The world rarely binds people with chains. It binds them with comfort, habits, and needs disguised as necessities. By living with the bare minimum, Yahya preserved a freedom few dare to pursue. His asceticism was not withdrawal from social responsibility. It was silent resistance. He did not need speeches to expose corruption. His life alone unsettled those who thrived on compromise. A person untouched by material desire becomes an unavoidable question to those who have built their lives around it. Yet his ascetic life was not harsh. His heart was described as gentle and compassionate. He wept out of fear of Allah, not a paralyzing fear, but one that produces humility and awareness. He owned little but was rich in empathy. He built no house, but left behind a moral space others could not ignore. This lifestyle gave Yahya rare clarity about right and wrong. When people are surrounded by pleasure, they convince themselves everything is relative. Yahya cut through that illusion by simplicity. With fewer distractions, conscience speaks more clearly. Free from desire, he faced truth without justification. In the modern world, his life carries a powerful message. We live in an age of endless consumption, where worth is measured by ownership and enjoyment. Simplicity is seen as failure. Yahya shows the opposite. The less dependent one is on the outer world, the stronger the inner world becomes. Asceticism for Yahya was not self-punishment, but the discipline of saying no to what is unnecessary. It was mastery over desire, not denial of existence. In a society that glorifies indulgence, such discipline becomes an act of resistance. That is why Yahya was not weak, but unbreakable. A person with nothing to lose cannot be threatened, and that is precisely why his presence was intolerable to a society accustomed to control through reward and punishment. His simple life was not a detail, but the foundation of everything that followed. That inner freedom allowed him to stand before power without fear, speak truth clearly, and ultimately accept the terrible cost of refusing to compromise. Yahya's death was not sudden or accidental. It was the endpoint of a long path paved with small compromises, deliberate silences, and inverted moral boundaries. When society grows comfortable with wrongdoing, truth becomes an offense to be eliminated. Yahya did not confront power aggressively, and he did not incite rebellion. He did one thing, the most dangerous thing in a corrupt society. He named wrongdoing as wrongdoing. When Herod lived openly in sin and normalized desire, Yahya spoke plainly. No violence, no ornate rhetoric, just clarity. And clarity threatened power. Power tolerates vague criticism. But when someone declares limits power cannot cross, tolerance ends. That statement judges not just actions, but the moral foundation power hides behind. The tragedy of Yahya lies not only in Herod's act, but in society's response. Religious elites remain silent. Those tasked with guarding truth chose to protect their status. That silence was not neutrality, it was complicity. When voices fall silent, violence no longer hides. The crowd did not stand with Yahya either. Silent admiration did not outweigh fear. Yet indifference became fertile ground for evil. Not everyone must be corrupt. Enough people only need to avoid involvement. Yahya's imprisonment was not for trial, but isolation. Power does not argue with truth. It removes it from public view. Yet even imprisoned, Yahya remained an unbearable reminder. His existence alone disturbed sleep. His death exposed society's decay in its rawest form. His head was severed and presented as entertainment. This was not merely murder, it was ritual humiliation of truth. When a society can turn a prophet's head into amusement, no boundary remains. Before Yahya, his father Zachariah was murdered. After Yahya, Isa became a target. This pattern reveals a brutal law of history. When societies kill the righteous, they cross a point of no return. Truth is no longer debated, but destroyed. Yet Yahya's death was not his failure. It was the indictment of a society that protected desire over conscience. His death echoes through history as warning. Truth has a price. often paid in the blood of those who refuse compromise. Power fades, truth remains. Those who killed Yahya vanished into time while his name endures as moral courage. His death did not silence truth, it deepened it. After Yahya and Isa, humanity entered a long silence. 600 years without a new prophet. This period, called fatra, exposed humanity when left without direct revelation. That feeling is returning today, louder and more confusing. We have more information than ever, yet less direction. Knowledge increased, wisdom did not. Light was not extinguished, but drowned in noise. In this chaos, Yahya stands as a moral compass. He offered no system or utopia, and he lived rightly. And that has become the hardest act today. His dialogue with Shaitan about desire is not mystical fantasy. It is psychological truth. Shaitan does not conquer with force, but with desire. Uncontrolled desire erodes freedom. Today it appears as addiction to validation, consumption, comparison, and instant gratification. Yahya did not deny desire. He disciplined it. Freedom comes not from satisfying every urge, but choosing not to. In an indulgent society, restraint becomes revolutionary. Yahya also challenges the age of artificial intelligence. Intelligence cannot replace wisdom. Algorithms cannot replace conscience. The danger is not machines becoming human, but humans becoming mechanical. His life warns of the cost of truth. Today the price may be isolation or defamation rather than execution. Loneliness is not always error. Sometimes it is position. Yet his message is not despair. It is grounding. One does not need to change the world. One must not let the world deform the heart. Yahya lived briefly, but his life outweighed time. He left no empire, only a standard. In modern fatra, that standard is priceless. Truth, discipline, and moral courage never expire. Living rightly has never been easy. Truth has a cost. Sometimes that cost is life, but the cost of not living rightly is far greater. Losing conscience, losing self, losing the ability to distinguish light from darkness. Applying this today requires small, brave choices, refusing compromise, restraining desire, choosing simplicity, guarding moral boundaries. Yahya reminds us that while not everyone must change the world, everyone must protect their heart. When enough people do so, hope remains. If this story moved you, join the Prophetic History Explained community to explore more timeless lessons, and subscribe to support content that remains honest, courageous, and uncompromising with truth.